here I touched on anti-corruption, transparency, governance. It's perhaps the moment to move to you, because I want to ask you, from your perspective and with your long experience, what can Ukraine do to ensure that people see that they're getting the highest standards of project management, the reassurances to, what are the necessary conditions to make infrastructure decision making, both, kind of construction, operation, really meet the needs of Ukraine's people?
Very good. Thank you very much, Bill. Just by way of introduction, CoST has been active in Ukraine from about 2013, although at that time it was obviously a period of political upheaval and it took a while for the program to become established. But in the period since then, the CoST Ukraine program, I must say in the early years under the leadership of Natalie, who's the CoST Ukraine program manager and did an excellent job, made some real excellent progress developing innovative tools and approaches, disclosing data, building the capacity of stakeholders to use that data to exercise accountability, and ultimately delivering better value for public money. So good track record. I'm going to draw in part on the experience of CoST Ukraine, but CoST also works currently in 20 countries around the world, including other fragile and conflict-affected states. So I'll bring in some of that experience as well. And you mentioned the conditions, Bill. What are the necessary conditions? Obviously, they're many and varied. I'll limit, because of constraints on time, just to three that I think are very key. The first one is transparency and accountability, and this has been mentioned a number of times through the morning sessions and after lunch today. Something I want to stress here is that transparency is really fundamental. Sometimes it's perceived, it's something that we aim for in the future, or in a fairly sophisticated environment, something that it then becomes realistic to introduce. But really, transparency and accountability are really the kind of platforms for governance systems. And a lot of CoST experience is introducing these approaches in very challenging environments. I also wanted to stress that transparency without accountability doesn't actually get you very far. There are a number of governments who it would be unfair to name, high-income countries, who are very good in terms of disclosing data. When you go online, when you look at websites, there's masses of data that's available, but very few examples of stakeholders accessing that data, using it to exercise accountability and driving practical improvements. So absolutely, transparency and accountability must go together. The second one I think is very important, and where CoST Ukraine made some excellent progress previously, was multi-stakeholder working. And by that I mean government, private sector and civil society coming together in a joint effort to oversee the reform process. Now, multi-stakeholder working does not mean that government gives up its decision-making authority. It, after all, has the democratic mandate from the elections that have been held. But it does mean that government commits to sitting down with the private sector, civil society, building trust in a genuine partnership, and listening on and taking on the board's the concerns of those sectors. Now, we have found this doesn't happen spontaneously. It takes an investment of time and effort to build trust, to establish the rules of the game, and to go on this journey together and to drive a reform process. We have found that the solutions that emerge from this process, they have a high degree of legitimacy because all the stakeholders are around the table. They're comprehensive because they take into account the views of all the important stakeholders. And as a result, not surprisingly, they're more successful and they are more impactful. And Ukraine has a lot of experience in these things already, so multi-stakeholder working, I think, is very key. And finally, this is straying a little bit from the kind of the standard CoST approach, is that reconstruction must be Ukrainian-owned. We shouldn't underestimate the challenges that are going to be faced by the government with an inevitably depleted public service, pressure to restore basic services and prevent the suffering of the people, and an inflow of resources from international supporters that needs to be managed. And infrastructure is already a very risky proposition. The nature of construction means that it's inherently risky. And a conflict-affected situation just really heightens all of those risks. So a very challenging environment. In some of the other countries where we've worked, the risks that this represents to MDBs and bilaterals, one of the ways of dealing with it is that their investment is off budget. It means that they don't really recognize the government client. Sometimes they will replace the government as the client themselves or appoint a client as a way of managing the risks. Now, we can understand where the international donors are coming from, because quite often they are tax dollars or euros, and there is accountability to the citizens who pay those taxes or the sources of the official development assistance. But I know it causes great anger in governments, particularly amongst reform-minded officials and ministers, who say, look, if we're going to strengthen our governance system, we need to exercise them. There needs to be resources going through them. So the way that the government can reassure the international donors is to be open and transparent. And occasionally things will go wrong, and you're honest about them, and you're very open, and you don't conceal them. So transparency and accountability, multi-stakeholder working, and let's make sure that the reconstruction process is owned and led by Ukrainians who are accountable to the international community who are supporting them. I'll pause there. Thank you.
I want to ask you about the skills, the capabilities, the systems that you think Ukraine is going to need to ensure that public and private sectors are able to manage reconstruction to the highest levels of efficiency and probity and transparency.
Yes, thank you. And Natalie referred to some of the examples of how advanced Ukraine has been in terms of digital transformation. And anyone who's visited there in recent years would be very aware of that. And I think none of us would be surprised if, as a result of the war, if some of the momentum had been lost around those reforms. But as Natalie said, they have in fact been remarkably resilient. Many of them are still in place. And when I engage in Ukraine, it tends to be people who are promoting transparency, accountability, and open government reforms. And it's a real crucible of ideas. People are fizzing with ideas and desperate to get on and start with the reconstruction and to imply some of the ideas that they've got. So I wanted to refer specifically, if I can, to just one example of that. And it's called Rise Ukraine. It's a coalition of Ukrainian and international organizations working very closely with the Ministry of Infrastructure. One of their main tasks is at the moment they're developing an electronic reconstruction management system. Now, I'm not going to do justice to their efforts in this short overview, but it will be a database of projects. It'll have a tracking and reporting mechanism. It will have a series of dashboards that are going to make data available in a way that's very digestible by non-specialists, available to media to support media reporting. It's not the first time that we've had this kind of collaboration in Ukraine. Many of you will be familiar with Prozoro, where the government entered into partnership with civil society and other partners. So there is a track record in Ukraine of this kind of effort. I think this time it's a broader coalition. It includes more international partners. CoST is pleased to be supporting it. Many other international partners will. I know that they're developing the platform now and they're desperate to engage with IFIs, with bilaterals. So please do make contact and open the conversation with them and be involved at the ground floor of that. The second thing, if I can, just very briefly to mention, and I'm very pleased that some of the other panelists have spoken about the private sector. Really, really important. Don't underestimate the importance. The international private sector is obviously going to have a very key role to play. International competitive bidding is going to be very important. But this is a fantastic opportunity to build the domestic private sector as well. And I think the starting point needs to be, what are the needs of the Ukrainian construction industry currently? Is it access to lines of credit? Is it ensuring them that there is the system is delivering the tradespeople, the technologists, the professionals that are going to be needed in the next decade or so to lead the construction effort? Is it visibility over a pipeline of projects so that they can invest themselves and make sure that they're ready to deliver on those opportunities? It needs to start with the needs of the domestic construction industry. working in partnership with international partners, international competitive bidding, a one-off opportunity, really important. I'll pause there. Thank you. The CoST is active in 20 countries, most of them affected by COVID. And all of the examples that we got where emergency procurement procedures were used were almost exclusively negative, I think. And you understand the need to mobilize very rapidly. People are suffering. We all remember the images, for example, from Italy, not just Italy and other countries, where there was an urgent need to mobilize ventilators, for example. Those are the kind of pressures that public officials are under. But I think it's a really good question, and it pulls out that tension, doesn't it? There are always trade-offs in these situations, I think. So a real need to mobilize quickly to prevent human suffering, but also a need to be open and transparent and engage citizens. How do those two things sit together? Just very briefly, I had a conversation with some OECD colleagues over lunch today, and we were talking about transparency and the risk that that can represent to governments, because it is a risk, even for a reforming government. When you open yourselves up to transparency, you're liable to be criticized. There will be decisions in the pipeline, this long process that Natalie refers to, that when they come to be identified, it can reflect negatively on the government. But the way that I look at it is that transparency can be seen in a different way. It can provide protection for governments, but it does require a degree of political courage. The government needs to say, we're not perfect, there are going to be problems, we're going to do our best, please be patient with us. We are reform-minded, we're trying to do the right thing, but occasionally things will go wrong and we're not going to hide that from you. We're going to be very open, and I think the citizens appreciate that. One last idea, Bill. I think I would summarize it as solidarity, the feeling of solidarity that there is internationally, that there is in this room, the admiration that we have for the Ukrainian people and the way that they've dealt with the violent incursion into this country, this awful war. Let's continue that. Let's not let that come off the front page. Let's ensure we have solidarity for years to come until the reconstruction is complete.